And welcome back, footy fans. It's another episode of Donnie's Disposals. I am your host, Coach Donnie Hess here, back with I know it's late, ladies and gentlemen, but a few scheduling issues and a particular co-host of mine who I would have loved to have on could not make it. So as per usual, I call one of my Mr. Dependables. He's been my backup all year long, and he's so fantastic. I love chatting with him. Rick Scheibani of the LA Dragons. Rick, thank you for joining me again, sir.
My pleasure, Donnie. It's great to have a 3-day weekend. It's great to have finals footy coming up, and yeah, there's plenty of stuff to talk about, and we've got a really intriguing top eight this year. So I think there's going to be plenty of fireworks.
I will not disagree with you, sir. Just before, I know it's been a little over a week because of everything, but I want to get round 24 covered just because I don't want to not talk about it. It was a little bit anticlimactic, unfortunately, after the previous round. So, your thoughts on round 24 as we step into less than 3 days away from the first game of finals?
Yeah, well, I mean, there were definitely a lot of key storylines. Of course, Collingwood having no issue whatsoever with Essendon. That was pretty shocking how non-competitive the Bombers were. Of course, my Giants got into the finals, and the Doggies were bounced, even though the Bulldogs beat Geelong by 25. Giants come through with a big win over Carlton, and North finally wins. They beat a Gold Coast team. Two teams that are playing for pretty much nothing but pride. But Clarko finally getting another win in the final game of the round or in final game of the season, and then of course the D's making a nice statement of their own, beating the Swans. But I'm sure those two teams could conceivably see each other again in a couple of weeks. So there's a lot of interesting stuff. Of course, top four. We've got Collingwood, Brisbane, Port, and Melbourne, and it's going to be really interesting to see how that all shakes out. I tipped the D's, as you might remember, at the start of the year. I tipped them to win the flag again. That could definitely still happen. Of course, there's a lot of intrigue with how good Brisbane and Collingwood have looked at their best, I think, and even Port. Port kind of, faded out down the stretch a little bit, but they had a big win over Richmond in the finale. They should be getting some healthy bodies back soon. I know that back line is probably a little bit suspect for Port, but again, at their best, they can definitely break through and potentially win a flag. Of course, as we know, just like any non-Victorian team, that if they can't win at MCG on the right day, they're not going to win a flag. But on paper, Port, Collingwood, Brisbane, Melbourne, they all conceivably have a shot, and that's why they're top four.
I'm one of those. We'll discuss this when we preview the finals, but this is honestly, this is a finals year that I think there's 5 or 6 teams that I think could potentially win. I know that the common consensus is the top four, but I think there's a couple in the bottom four that if they get the right draw could get there. So it'd be very fascinating. But let's go through round 24 really, really quickly. I know there's a couple of games that honestly I'd like to pass over, especially this first one, as Collingwood on the Friday night decides to lay it to smack us down on an Essendon team that all of a sudden decided they wanted to go for their golfing trip 2 weeks early and lose by 70, 101-31. I mean, plain
Yeah.
and simply, Collingwood got a win that I think a few in the competition were like, darn you, Essendon, at least show up to test them a little bit, especially
Yeah.
undermanned with no Murphy, no Moore, no Dacos. And they absolutely cruised to the 70-point win. I mean, it's a insipid performance by Essendon. And
Absolutely.
I don't begrudge the Essendon fans for being quite upset because I mean,
Yeah.
6 weeks ago, this was a finals team. This was a team being talked about in the finals, and now they're going golfing a few months early.
Yeah, I mean that was gift wrapped. They're scheduled down the stretch. Of course, they played North twice and West Coast twice. One of the few teams to have that happened this season. Like just to have like 3 goals total, 0 goals at quarter time. Like yeah, they just didn't show up. They didn't get off the bus, and I reckon Brad Scott is really going to use this as a huge motivator in heading into the summer and the off-season program because Essendon showed plenty of flashes this year. They've got some, they just re-signed Darcy Parish. It looks like they're going to hang on to Mason Redmond. I think there's definitely, a lot of talent on that list. And, there's, if Peter Wright can stay healthy, they can do some damage, but it just never clicked for Essendon. I think Collingwood got some needed percentage there. And I think Dugowie is really getting ready to have a huge finals campaign. Jack Ginnivan kicking 3 goals. It's good to have him back if you're a Clyde supporter. Of course, we know he's had a very up and down season. I think sometimes there's been a question of like where he really fits, with the Daycock brothers, with Sidebottom, with Pendlebury in, the Collingwood group where Ginnivan could be most damaging because, he's a controversial player, but he's a really exciting player to watch too. So, if he and DeGoey, of course, they're kind of similar. They're both kind of volatile. They don't always do the right thing off the field, but I reckon they're huge X factors, especially because Mychek did kick 3 goals, but he's been up and down. He's been a little up and down as well too. Now again, we know these are Collingwood players that can step through and have big moments in finals. We've seen that a lot of times, but the question is, that worrying patch of form they had down the stretch in the final month of the season. Of course, they won't have Nick Daycock available for the final, or the first final at least. So the Pies really need everything to break right. As we were mentioning before we start off, again, they can just pull victories out of thin air sometimes. We know how good Craig McRae teams are in close games, but that could be really tested coming up in the finals for sure.
Absolutely. I'm one of those where I look at it. Was this a little bit of fool's gold for Collingwood? I mean, did they get some confidence from it? Absolutely. I think Bobby Hill has actually been the reason that Jack Ginnivan has not been in, because I think Bobby Hill has almost been an improvement. And with Jack Ginnivan, I know, again, everybody says he's a controversial player. I don't think he's a controversial player. I think fans got angry because he willingly admitted on camera that he tried to draw freeze. And I think that kind of,
Right.
again, for the Collingwood fans, I don't think we boo him because we don't like the kid. I think they boo him because the kid was cocky about something and
Right.
now is kind of paying for it a little bit. Are there a few free kicks that probably should be called to him? Absolutely. But I
Yeah.
think the kid opened his mouth and now he's paying for it. Like, and
Well,
again,
you look at
I don't want him to get hurt. Trust me. I don't want
right.
that at all. But I think
Right.
that's the reason why fans of opposing teams have kind of made him the villain a little bit, is because
Sure.
he got a little cocky for a situation and he's paying for it a little bit. So
Well, you look at someone like Patty Dangerfield. Now he's another guy who gets criticized all the time for ducking,
Selwood
drawing free kicks, and
Selwood before he retired was
Selwood as well. But
notorious amongst other groups for
sure,
lowering his head, getting smacked in the face, and
yeah,
getting free kicks, but it was because he put
violating
himself
an
in a
unwritten
vulnerable
rule,
situation.
and yeah, it's and you're right. They didn't they didn't make a big deal about it, and Ginnivan did, and that's like you're right,
Mhm.
violating unwritten rule of not bending the rules to your advantage in that way. So, but
Mhm.
yeah, I do think the Pies, they're going to need everyone to really step forward and put their hand up on finals. I think they know
Mhm.
that, but at the same time, you got to stay healthy, and you can't have any pedestrians because everyone just has to raise that standard and be able to grind out those tough wins that you need to get in September. So
Yeah.
people
Finals
figure
footy
that
is
out.
another animal. Finals footy is another animal for sure. So it'll be interesting, like I said. And their matchup was probably the one they probably didn't want, but we'll discuss that a little bit later. So Fremantle come over to over to the MCG, and get a nice little win over Hawthorn. I think a lot of people have been super high on Hawthorn because they've been world beaters. They've taken down a couple of teams that I don't think people expected. I think overall, I think Hawthorne's season has been very good. Fremantle has really been kind of the disappointment, but I kind of saw this season coming a little bit because I think Griffin Logue and Blake Acres were bigger losses to Fremantle, and they just did. It took them a while to find Jackson's spot. And now
Yeah,
that they're kind of figured it out a little bit. They still had some patches. Darcy's a big loss. Jackson kind of stepped in, but there's definitely a difference. Hawthorne's a good team. Fremantle they had a better game plan in the end today, but Hawthorne, tons of positivity to look at going into this offseason, because I think they're 2 or 3 steps ahead of where I think some people thought they would be after this season.
yeah, no, yeah, I definitely think it's going to be really interesting in terms of just the momentum that they can carry in to, because like knowing that you have the double chance can be a double-edged sword, but I think with Collingwood, they're going to do a good job of just trying to stay focused on the task at hand and winning those matchups that they know they need to win. And of course, they're playing at the G. they've got a good record there. I think they're in good position, but I'm expecting that one to be really close. And talk about that matchup in a bit. Like
Absolutely. We jump to the game that I almost want to talk about a thing that has nothing to do with this game, but more of why this obsession nowadays with the media. We'll go through it. North Melbourne get a massive win to end their losing streak. They win the first two games
yeah,
and then don't win a game until round 24, beating the Suns 132-97. And
yeah,
the constant moaning by media people. Why did North Melbourne win the game? They cost themselves Harley Reid, and I
yeah,
just went. I don't think any of the players sitting in that North Melbourne locker room give a flying stuff about Harley Reid. I am sick and tired of the media. It annoys the
yeah.
living crap out of me how much they do this over here in the States. And now I'm starting to see it in Australia. Are you
Right.
kidding me right now? I
Yeah,
understand this Harley Reid kid is very, very good, and I've seen highlights of him. The kid looks absolutely fantastic. Is he a generational player? We'll have to see. I heard tons of things about Jason Horton-Francis, and I still haven't seen that generational player situation yet.
sure.
Was Dacos a generational player? Again, is the kid absolutely talented? I think he's in a system that fits him perfectly. So is he a generational? We'll have to see. But I'm just tired of this. Let the North Melbourne
Yeah,
players enjoy this. Let the fans enjoy this because 20 are so how many losses? They get a win at the end of the
yeah.
year 21 losses in a
21.
row. OMG. They get their third win. Let them enjoy it. Are they going to miss out on Hurley Reid? I'm not 100% sure because one of the best WA kids is a top 5 pick. The Eagles may take Curtin or try to trade and pick up 2 or 3 picks, and then maybe North can trade with them and get the first overall pick. There's a ton of permeations that's still going to happen. I don't want to talk about the off season, but I think the discussion overshadowed a great win. Did the Suns absolutely bugger this? Absolutely. They probably should have
Yeah,
won this one with the 80% of a premiership team sitting on this list by Dimmer Hardwick. Dimmer Hardwick, I love you, bud, but I don't think 80% of your list is on the list right now to win a premiership. I think you're living in dreamland on that one personally, but I just let North enjoy this. They earned
yeah.
this win at Blundstone Arena.
Well, it's a classic case of damned if you do, damned if you
If you
don't. I mean,
don't, exactly.
yeah, I mean, like you're right about like the American media. There's and and tanking. It's not exactly a new thing, but it only became well, we know it as tanking like a few years ago, probably. But nonetheless, yeah, it's like I mean, the point is, yeah, they finally got rid of that losing streak. You're up 21 straight games, just absurd in the modern game of footy to just be that for that many weeks. And yeah, no, like Nick Larkey's a kid they can build. LDU is a kid they can build around, regardless of what happens with Harley Reid, regardless of where he ends up. They've got a few good kids that they can build around for the future. They did re-sign Tara Thomas the other day. I keep wondering if that'll bite them on the rear end, given that he's been in trouble several times off field in the last calendar year. So terrific player, just someone who you wonder for a rebuild, where you want to minimize distractions, like either way, they do have some talented kids. Again, there's still jury's still out on some of them, but Sheasel, of course, getting a rising star, Wardlaw, they have some kids that they have reason to be excited about. And they're still going to be bottom 4 next year. Clarko's still got a long way to go, but like if you're a Roos fan, you can hopefully turn the page on 2023 and finally, put the last few years behind you because it's been such terrible footy to watch. It's a proud club. Those supporters deserve better than to see, a 21 game losing streak. So you've got some kids who are, just trying to build some confidence. They're definitely going to be bigger and stronger next year. I'm sure they'll get a reasonably good draft class, but eventually you're just going to get sick of losing and hopefully be able to string together some kids who can really make a difference and finally get some wins next year. Just 5 or 6 would be meaningful progress next year for North. So they're going to benefit from expectations being low, but they've still got some kids that would be a great player anywhere, not just on a bad team. They would be a great player anywhere. That's definitely Sheasel. That's definitely Larkey. That's definitely Wardlow. I think they still need, Ben Cunnington's retiring. He's a heart and soul player for them. Ben Mackay still on the fence whether he'll come back. But yeah, North just needs some tangible signs of success. And, a win over the Suns just with Dr. Order for
100%. The Mackay signing will be interesting. Do they let him go and then get, because I've heard everything from they could get two of the top three picks if Mackay gets signed to a free agent deal at high enough money. It'll be fascinating to see this draft because there's a ton of different ones. But I just, for the North fans that I knew, I reached out and wished them all the congratulations again. A huge win here. Suns a little bit disappointing, but again, what was there really to play for? I think North kind of were inspired a little bit by West Coast the week before winning. So it was kind of, I kind of chuckle a little bit on that. So let's jump up to the GABA in a game that honestly, like, I don't know about you, Rick, but this was probably the most least talked about top 8 matchup for a last round I've ever seen. I mean, a 12-point win by Brisbane. I mean, they get enough to get it done. The Saints
Yeah.
again, a little bit of a dour effort. Do they go in a little bit sour, a little bit into this final, especially with your Giants on the horizon? But Brisbane did enough that they needed to do. But this wasn't a game that I'm going to sit here and write home to mom about.
Yeah. I think again, you talk about Collingwood building percentage by blowing Essendon out of the water. Yeah, you wonder if the Lions are going to regret that in terms of, yeah, they're still going to be top four, but yeah, they just didn't have a convincing win they really needed, again, to have that extra confidence boost heading into the bye week, then heading into the finals. It's definitely something where there can definitely be some extra motivation that I'm sure Chris Fagan will mention to everyone in the film room. Like, we can't afford to be flat. We have to start quickly. Of course, they didn't kick accurately again. That was a huge issue. It's been an issue, a nagging issue for the Lions the last few years. And, finals, there's no margin for error. We know they're a team that doesn't play the MCG well. So again, we know getting the double chance and getting the home crowd at the GABA is going to be important. But yeah, you do wonder if they're going to be, extra motivated after an inaccurate performance against the Saints.
Definitely. I don't want to sit and spend a ton of time on this one just because, like I said, Lions did what they needed to do. Thankfully, no
They
injuries,
did.
everything like that. But it's kind of one of those workman-like ones. There wasn't a ton of things to talk about on this. Like, we'll go down to GMHBA Stadium where the Doggies did what they needed to keep their finals chances alive against a Cats team that, by honest reports, really was a second tier team with guys like Hawkins and Cameron as they kind of waved the white flag. They knew they wouldn't make finals, so they sent them in. And I don't know. Did you see the the Jeremy Cameron video that he put out on social media after the surgery where he was definitely a little loopy from the anesthesia? Like, I know I'm trying to get not to get off topic, but it was very comical. That little bit of video that I did see.
He's got that kind of sense of humor, so it wasn't too shocking to me. But yeah, I mean, it's however way you slice it, it is a lost season for Geelong. It's obviously a what if season. I mean, Cam Guthrie only gets 4 games. Everyone
Mhm.
banged up at some point, it seemed. Cameron Hawkins. So many guys that just did not get that opportunity at senior level and just, couldn't put together any consistent form just based on injuries. So it is a lost season. Honestly, really disappointing anytime you can't make finals, whether it's coming off the flag or not. But I think the bigger story coming out of this one is, again, we knew the Cats' injuries. That was an issue all year. But the Bulldogs, again, they did what they had to do, but the Giants had the last laugh. And
Mhm.
Doggies are going to miss finals, and there's going to be some serious questions about Luke Beveridge's future. At the start of the season, I was talking about how, to some degree, the Doggies have gotten complacent in terms of, like, it's not like they still think, oh, every year can be 2016 or we can start, at the 7th seed and make a match of Cinderella. I don't think they realistically think that can happen every year because it doesn't happen. It's very
Mhm.
rare in modern game. But the issue with the Doggies is that they've been hovering around that ever since. And with the talent they have on the list, they don't need any instructions. We know what there's one of the best players in the comp, but we still don't really know if Hugo Hagen is really going to be a superstar or, he had his accuracy issues this year. There were some games he was phenomenal. Sometimes he just disappeared. Aaron Naughton has had some amazing moments too, but no consistency there. Tim English was a phenomenal addition, or not addition, but he had a phenomenal season. He made the All Australian squad, right?
He was the ruck. He was the All Australian ruck.
I was going to say English was phenomenal. I thought he was, if it wasn't for Bontempelli, of course, he was probably the most fun player to watch, just because when Tim English is dominating, everyone else just feeds off of that, just like they do with Bont, just like they do with their other stars. So yeah, just a crazy disappointing finish to the year. I mean, they had more than enough chances. They just couldn't get it done when it really mattered. And they're just a team that you wonder whether it's Bevo just playing around with the magnets too much and not letting players be creative and trusting them, or if it's just like they just don't have the second tier, the VFL. They just don't have the lower levels like that's really almost always AFL ready. Because I think they should have had way more depth than they did this year, and I think that showed up week to week. Not in terms of that, I don't think it was a lack of effort or fitness. It was just they got caught flat-footed when experience guys don't get caught. So the Doggies have probably the most questions of any team that missed the A heading into the offseason, just because we know that they're capable enough. And it's so frustrating because they're just as talented as Carlton on paper. Why is Carlton playing finals and the Doggies aren't? Kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy, because the Blues had moments where they looked dead in the water as well, but they rose to the occasion when the Doggies just kind of faded out week to week.
I think in some situation that comparison is kind of nice, because I think honestly, I think the Doggies, they brought in some guys that I'm still trying to figure out. Like Liam Jones was a perfect pickup because they were hurting defensively, but I still just don't understand the Roy Lobb bringing. I just don't understand it. I think it made their forward line too tall. They were too slow. There was no tackle pressure. Ugo Hagen still is very inconsistent. Naughton is one of those that he's hot and cold. He's on, he's off, he's on, he's off. He's kind of like a light switch. You just never know what's gonna flip either way. The Doggies, if you look at it, like I said, they're a top four side list wise. If you look at their list on paper, they should be a top four side, and the execution and structure is just not finals or top four team. And they almost kind of become their midfields kind of become accumulators, but not damagers sometimes. And that's, I think, is the frustrating part, because Bont is always going to be an amazing player. He's always going to be in the top 10 of Brownlow votes when he's on. But it's guys like Treloar, it's McRae. I don't know what happened to McRae this year. It was like he totally forgot who he was. It was fascinating to see him absolutely deteriorate this year. When you look at their midfield names, Caleb Daniels as well, like a down year for him. And I think that then went to why not, and why Lob, why Ugo Hagen just did not fire as well. So
Yeah.
I agree with you. I think this is a Doggies team that there's going to be a lot of turmoil at the kennel this year. And does Bevo survive? I'm fascinated to see, because there could be a little bit of murmurs that maybe his message has gone stale a little bit with this group, because it
Right.
is getting older. It's a group that's getting older. You have an Ugo Hagen, but after that, there isn't a lot of young up and coming talent on this team. So it'll be fascinating to see how they go. So let's jump out to the West Coast, which unfortunately this game was more about Tex Walker trying to maybe steal the Coleman a little bit. But the people that are calling Tex selfish, I watched this game. He was not selfish. He was giving off just as much as he was taking. Were they trying to get him as much as they could? Absolutely. When you can help Tex Walker essentially win a Coleman medal, this doesn't surprise me. A sad way to see some champions of the game and Nick Natanui, Luke Shuey, and Shannon Hearn go out. Unfortunately, it would have been interesting to see if West Coast could have sent their champions out on a win. Unfortunately, this season has just been an unmitigated disaster out west. But unfortunately, there is a little bit of positivity for me, is that some of these older players taking up spots are now out. You can fill them with young up and coming talent. So I think the rebuild is pretty much on. the Adam Simpson discussion. I understand his record is atrocious, but I don't think putting in a new coach right now in this meat grinder is a good idea. I think if you're going to bring in a new coach, you bring him in when you've got the best possible shot to be on the upward instead of potentially still maybe a step backwards before they start to go forward. So Crow's
Well,
great win,
it's
Tex Walker fantastic, a fitting send off that the Eagles Nation got there for them, but another one where kind of anticlimactic, unfortunately, in the end.
agreed. And yeah, hats off to Shuey, to Nick Nat. Those guys have been soldiers for that club for so long. And yeah, yeah, the Eagles showed enough signs of life down the stretch. They did grab a couple of wins in the last month of the season. This is a proud football club, and it's almost the opposite thing to North, because of course North was almost changing coaches way too quick. And that destroyed their list development for a good, 3-4 solid years. That's why they've been so non-competitive. But with West Coast, it's not surprising. Everyone's like, oh, Adam Simpson stayed there too long. Again, they did enough down the stretch to save his ass and to just, you're right, fire him at this point, whether it makes financial sense or not, just would, yeah, do more harm than good in the long run. And again, you wonder, like, much like Geelong, if they had actually had a healthy list for any portion of the year, what might the season have been? But, as we know, it's in the books. There's no do-overs. Credit to the Eagles fans. I'm looking at the attendance right now, 47,027 at the stadium. Those guys watched some horrible footy this year. Again, it's a proud club with a proud supporter base. Definitely better days ahead for the Eagles. Tim Kelly just won the best and fairest. He's definitely a great piece to build around if he has some help. Oscar Allen kicked 4 goals. We know what he can do, much like Nick Larky, a big, tall kid that you can build around for the future. And you're right about Tex Walker. Again, 6'9". He doesn't quite get to Coleman in the end, as Charlie Curnow did. Congrats to him. But yeah, Saligo had 2 goals. Fogarty had a goal. Ray Shelley had a few. They definitely spread the ball around. Again, Adelaide struggled with accuracy. They kicked, 17 goals, 21. So yeah, they definitely have a lot of things to work on. The Crows obviously will, the ultimate case of being snake bit. We're not going to rehash the controversy in the Sydney game, but the Crows know it's final with their butts next year. They definitely showed enough to be a top 8 side most of the season, and they've got a great mix of young kids and a lot of veterans to spread the footy around, play that style of footy that Matty Nix loves. They've definitely got more than enough talent to be in the finals contention. It's just this was not their year, but we know what they're capable of on a good day. They've got an amazing home field advantage at Adelaide Oval. So the Crows are going to be coming next year. I'd be shocked if they aren't top 8 365 days.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you. I told a few of my Crowy supporter friends, which it's been a little bit of a strained relationship for some of them because I'm a Swan supporter. But as I told them, I am very much everything that they have said. They should be in the finals. 100% agree. You will not see me argue with that. This is a Crows team that they were fun to watch. They were excited. They were an excitement machine. If Tex Walker can be 90% next year of what he was this year, they're going to be dangerous next year. Their defense, if they can be healthy and structure their defense effectively, I think Matty Nix has got something to where the next year's showdowns I think are going to be absolute crackers next year, because I think both teams are going to be in up to their necks when it comes to finals. Speaking of the other team in Adelaide, it was a great transition as Port Adelaide beat the Richmond Tigers 94-63. Another workmanlike performance again. Butters, Rosie, absolutely fantastic. I mean, it's hard not to say that these two are not two very informed players going into the finals. These two youngsters are absolutely grabbed Port Adelaide by the scruff of the neck and said, we're taking you with us. And it's been fun to watch. It'll be interesting to see how this team performs come finals, because again, there's a lot of pressure on Hinckley. Can he get this scrappy Port Adelaide team deep into finals?
Yeah, he finally got that extension, so good on him. And you're right, workmanlike performance. Port has had plenty of those where you just have to roll up your sleeves, win the hard yards, and just be able to play some consistent footy and play some physical footy. So I think, as I was talking about with you before we started rolling, Port's back line has been the big concern. We know they've had some injury issues there. They've given up 100 plus too many times than I'd be comfortable with it. I'm a power supporter, but they've definitely been consistent overall. They definitely deserve that top four spot, even if they've been a little bit streaky heading into September. They got an important win over Richmond. Again, not building as much percentage as Collingwood did, but still a pretty solid victory. And you're right, Butters, Rosie, all those guys. And it's almost where, Ollie Wines won a Brownlow a couple of years ago. And now you're almost hearing about Rosie and Butters more than you are about Wines. And it's a credit to just the culture that Port has. They have so many midfielders they're just hungry. They love chasing the footy. They love tackling. Those guys are players that are really the bread and butter, or maybe the bread, butter, and Vegemite of the footy club. So
I love the
yeah,
pun there.
they've got plenty of talent. Again, on a good day, if they're traveling well, Port can very much do some damage, and maybe even get all the way to a grand final. But of course, how are they going to play at the MCG? What's going to be their MO as they go into finals? Are they going to be able to stay healthy? Are they going to be able to get some guys back? I think there's definitely, there's a lot of players. I think Amir is a big X factor for them because, again, the back line's been under siege a bit for Port. Obviously, whether Charlie Dixon is helping and firing, or the big targets up forward. We know Port can score from a lot of different ways, but we definitely, they know they don't want to make it too difficult on themselves either. So, it's all a question of if they start fast and if they can match the opposition in physicality. Because they can do that, they usually win.
Yeah, it'll be fascinating. Their matchup is probably one of the other intriguing ones in finals that I cannot wait to watch, because I think their matchup with Brisbane is going to be absolutely electric. I cannot wait to see Neil, Dunkley, Rosie, Butters, Lockhorns. It's gonna be fun. So we'll jump to the SCG, where this is almost as much about the game as it was about sending Buddy off, which I have to say that I wasn't expecting this. I'm happy that Buddy agreed to this, because I know he's a very private person. He's not big on accolades. He doesn't want the praise as much. He wants it more to be about the footy. So for him to be able to have that opportunity to be thanked by and a sold out SCG, which again, I tip my cap to the Sydney faithful for coming out and showing the big bud some love. The D's kind of spoiled the party with a 77-56 win. And this was one of those where it was another workmanlike performance. The D's show why they're being talked about as the foil to Collingwood for most of the season. But a little bit down as Jake Melksham tears his ACL in this game. And again, I never want to see a player go down like that, especially just before finals, especially considering the whole only the players that play in the grand final get the medal part, which I know I'm an American, but I'm going to say it, I think is BS. I think it takes an entire roster to win a championship. I don't like that rule. I think that rule is old fashioned. I think it's it kind of craps all over your list, because I do not know a single team in the last 20 years that has won an entire comp only playing 22 or 23 players.
Yeah. Fair enough. No, I hear you, but you're right. Great tribute to Buddy. Glad it was able to be done in a way that befits a champion. And you're right. Buddy's not the most. He's a bit of an introvert. I think he definitely just loves the thrill of competing and just being out there with his mates and winning than he is about just like soaking in all the achievements. But yeah, I mean he deserves to have that lap and to just be appreciated for what he's brought to the game. With Hawthorn, with Sydney, just an absolutely phenomenal player and one of the all-time greats. But yeah, Swans can't get it done in the end. You feel bad for Harold Golden. You love that kid. 42 touches and 2 goals, and yet they still fall short. Again, another, much like Adelaide, they just couldn't kick accurately. Keeney kicks 0 goals too. That's a bit of a concern for me, for Sydney. Like, I do wonder also, just like, I think they'll figure it out, but also like post Tom Hickey, what the rough situation is long term. I think that's a big question. Just what Sydney is going to do. McLean can play rock. There's definitely there's going to be options there. There's definitely athletes there, but what the post Tom Hickey era looks like in the ruck department.
Mhm.
If some of their players like Heaney, Warner was pretty great. Parker was pretty good, but you know, Sydney has definitely had moments again where they just faded out down the stretch, and we know they can't afford that against Carlton and just in the postseason in general. So
Mhm.
with the D's, you're right about Melksham. That's a terrible injury. Wish him all the best. Bailey Frick had 5 goals. He was the real star for the D's. And they have enough talent where they can kind of patch over that with Van Ruin, if they can move Petrarca forward, Cosy Pickett. I know he's been a little bit up and down himself, but we know what he's capable of when he's firing on all cylinders. He's been in some good form lately. Clayton Oliver's healthy, so Melbourne
Mhm.
has the horses, and we haven't even gotten to Max Gagne yet. Or Jake Lever and Stephen May in the backfield or in the back line. I definitely like the D's chances against Collingwood and just in general. They're an experienced list. Simon Goodwin's a great coach. I reckon they can do some damage, but as we know, it's that they've had some issues with that forward line, and with someone like Malcolm, who probably heading into this year was a bit of an unsung hero, probably got overlooked a little bit, but he proved his value, and now he gets hurt. So if I'm Simon Goodwin, I'm challenging my side just to understand what we're up against, know what we're about, embrace the moment, because they've thrived in high pressure environments before, but also just be able to do it for a guy like Melch, put his body on the line and was having a really great season up till that point. So the D's are definitely dangerous, but I think they're still in prove it mode. They haven't been. They didn't win the minor premiership. They've been hearing all year about Collingwood, so I think they're going to be very motivated heading into September. I'm sure the
Mhm.
Swans will be too, and they're bucking the trend in terms of like grand final runners up, making the A, and potentially making a run. But again, they're facing a red hot Carlton team. Sydney, again, we know what they can do at their best, and Golden has been fantastic. Warner's been great. Of course, Amarty and McDonald had their moments up forward now that Buddy's moving on. But again, like Lee Heaney, some of the usual suspects who I think probably need to really step up and put their hands up. Like Rampy, some of the other guys in the back line as well that I think could you know I don't think they have a ton to prove, but they definitely need to be able to show, hey, we're the Swans. We still belong in this conversation. We kind of flew under the radar a little bit this year, in patchy form, but we're in the A, and we're confident, that we can go toe to toe with Carlton. But again, Carlton's on a hot streak themselves. I think they're really dangerous heading into the postseason as well. So it's going to be really spicy.
We'll discuss this a little bit more. I have a few thoughts on that, but we'll go to it. Plus, I want to see your smile as you hear this.
Right.
As GWS solidify their spot in the finals with a
Yes, we
105-73 point win over that Carlton team that you just said, who I think kind of
did.
cool. In some situations, I
The
think they were.
flag is up. The flag is up. Go Giants.
I
The
honestly
lid is off. We're in the A.
I'll say this, and I don't want to offend the Blues fans that watch this, but I think they were so focused on get Charlie Curnow the damn Coleman that I think they took their eyes off the ball on a big chance to get some, even to keep the momentum going a little bit. And GWS is just that scrappy team that is just like you never will count them out until the final siren goes. Toby Green is always a pain in the ass. Tom Green is absolutely flourished now that Taranto are out there. Kelly has done well. Canelio is starting to really, really perform now that the captaincy the gorilla that was
Yeah.
on the back of him with the captaincy is off. Now he can just kind of play. Whitfield is back to his normal bests. And you're seeing guys like Connor Iden and Callum Brown really step up for them. Those unsung
Yeah.
hero type of guys. And you did this without Sam Taylor, which is very,
Yeah.
very impressive when you face Charlie Curnow and Harry Mackay in one lineup. You don't have Sam Taylor and you still get the win. Impressive by the Giants. This is a Giants team that, if they can get going, can make a run. because they're just pesky enough. They know they're going to be on the road pretty much this entire finals unless somehow they meet Sydney, which I don't think is going to happen. This is a Giants team that honestly you just can't count them out because they just never
Yeah.
give up. Hogan and Riccardi can kick goals. Green can do anything. Tom Green is incredible. And Kieran Briggs has got to be the most improved ruckman of this entire season. There is no doubt about it in my mind.
Yeah, Briggs was a mainstay in my fantasy lineup this year. I think he's done a phenomenal job. And special shout out to Callum Brown. Like, I love how he's developed. Like, you see him. He's a big dude. You rarely have the Irish, the Gaelic converts who can play that big bulldozing center half forward role, and he plays that really well. I remember the first few games I saw him play, very raw talent, but under Kingsley's system, he really has thrived. And with someone like Hogan, now, Hogan had a phenomenal run to close the season. I think he's going to be a big part of what we're cooking up against St. Kilda this weekend. But yeah, no, I just think in general, like, even when Hogan isn't kicking 5, 6, or 7 goals, or 10, like he did a few weeks ago. Like, even if he's not taking a bat, he's always been one of the best contested marks in competition. Alan Brown feeds off of that. Jake Riccardi has been in great form. Those big targets up forward. Of course, Toby Green gets all the attention at small forward. Brent Daniels has been good. Daniel Lloyd, of course, he's retiring, but he's been a very unselfish, just a blue collar guy who can kick goals from great angles when he has to. So the forward line has been great. Hobbs had his 200th game. You're right. He's been in your best form. No longer the captain, but no problem. And obviously, Tom Green has come on really well. Bucky Ash has definitely had his moments. And you're right. Without Sam Taylor, the back line's been holding up really well. Iden and Holmes, those guys have been really good veteran. It's hard to think of Iden as a veteran. He's still got the baby face, but he's got so many games under his belt now. And, everyone's talking about the orange tsunami being back. But yeah, when the Giants are on a run, they're on a run. We talk about some inaccurate kicking from the Swans and the Crows. Both these teams kicked accurately. The Blues, again, congrats to Charlie Curnow. He gets 3 goals and he takes home the Coleman medal. But yeah, they kicked 11 goals, 7. Giants kicked 16 goals, 9. So some accurate kicking on display. With Carlton, I definitely think, like a little case of coasting, having a winning streak already, having banked finals. They didn't have to sweat on it like they did last year. But I think, that they missed an opportunity to potentially bolster their finals claim. So I think they'll be fine against Sydney. I think they match up pretty well. But Carlton definitely needs to be mindful of these little slips, because you can't afford to be a sneak at the switch when it's finals time. So again, Curnow gets the Coleman. They compete hard for 3 quarters, but the Giants end up running away with it. So
yeah, it'll be very, very interesting. So let's go to it, sir. Finals. We are less than 40. We are less than 3 days away. It is Monday night as we are recording. This will be Thursday morning. We'll see the first game of the finals, and boy, howdy, do we get a good one as Collingwood face Melbourne in the 1-4 matchup to in the qualifying final to see who moves on. So I want to do this really quickly. One thing that you're looking forward to in this game, and one X factor that you think will flip this game for a team, either one.
I think how Collingwood. It's the obvious one, but how Collingwood can adjust to not just Nick Dacos being out, but just being under the magnifying glass for having all the scrutiny of, again, they did not finish well. They did not have a good, a strong month to finish the season. Getting the minor premiership, that's some minor solace, no pun intended. But yeah, I think just Collingwood, handling the pressure, understanding that, we just need to focus on the task at hand. And, I think as far as the match with Melbourne goes, just figuring out a way to shut down Max Gawn. Because, as dangerous as everyone else is on the Ds, he makes that team go. And I think you'd agree with me there. You're shaking your head yes. So I think it could easily be a one goal game. I'm tipping Melbourne by a goal. Spoilers, but I think it's going to be won or lost in the engine room. We know that most games of footy are like that. So in terms of Petrarca, Oliver, gone, all those Melbourne players versus Dacos versus Pendlebury versus the Collingwood engine room, what they can cook up and how they can respond because both these teams seem to thrive when their backs are against the wall. But again, in terms of handling the expectations, handling the pressure, and again, the tendency not to be sloppy because it's like, oh, if we don't get them this week, we've got a double chance because you've got to make sure they are focused. And I think both coaches, again, I was just singing Simon Goodwin's praises. Craig McRae, of course, he's done a phenomenal job with the Pies. They know. So I think they're going to keep everyone as locked in as possible. But again, it's about minimizing outside distractions and just putting together the game plan that can get you that big win.
Well, here's my thing, and I kind of said this last year, and I'm going to say it again. My question for this one: will fly ball work in finals? Because fly ball can be great in home and away when you play when you play inferior teams. But last year, this Collingwood team went 1-2 in the finals.
They did.
Their only win was over a team that they knew they were going to be in that elimination in that semifinal. So will fly ball work is my biggest thing. And then I think the X factor, and you said it, is Max Gawn. I think the X factor in this is if Max Gawn has a dominant Max Gawn type performance, I think Collingwood is in trouble because they have been smashed in clearance the last 6 or 7 weeks. They have not done well in clearance until that Essendon game, which, like I said, was kind of a free hit for Collingwood because Essendon, again, they were thinking about teeing off on the first green at whatever golf course they decided they wanted to play the next day. So that's my X factor. My X factor is Max Gawn because if there is nothing Cameron and Cox can do to stop Max Gawn, because when Max Gawn is on, this Melbourne team is damn near unbeatable because he can give first choice to Petrarca, to Oliver, to Viney, to Brayshaw, and I love this defensive kind of rant pack that is Collingwood. They're going to have an absolute nightmare if they're getting Oliver, Petrarca, Viney, Brayshaw, Hunter, and Langdon putting it down the throats of Rooney, Fritsch, Van Rooyen, most likely McDonald, who will probably step in for that, and then potentially arresting Max Gawn. That is a recipe for disaster for Collingwood, and I don't care how much you can come back. If Gawn is dominating like this, you are not going to be able to get on a run. And Bobby Hill and Brody Majacek are going to grow dust out front, and Lever and May are back there. So this is a game where if I'm Collingwood, this is frightening a little bit for you because you could go all year being the measuring stick, and the chance for you to potentially go out in straight sets is very possible because you get the D's and then potential matchup with a couple of very good teams. Yes, they lost their last game, but both teams playing very good footy going into the finals in Carlton and Sydney. That's a recipe for a Collingwood team to potentially go out in straight sets. I'm not going to tell you what my choice is yet, but if I'm Collingwood or the D's, I'm a little scared. I'm a little terrified because if you don't win this game, your semifinal matchup is not easy. No matter which of these two teams you either get the smash and bash, absolute clearance, dominant team in Carlton, or a Sydney team that is high pressure, that can slingshot, that has dangerous weapons all over the field and great kicking, which can tear up a defense like Collingwood that has been a little suspect over the last few rounds. So that is my X factor on that. Let's go to the other side of this side of the bracket. Carlton v Sydney. I'll go with this one. My question on this is, can Carlton handle the pressure? Because they are being talked like this is a no-brainer. There is no way they will lose to the Swans. This is a Swans team that's lucky to get there. That they got exposed against Melbourne. That if they can win the clearance, there's no chance. Sydney's been weak in the clearance game this entire time. That is a recipe for disaster with a young team that has not played a lot of finals, guys that have never played in finals against a team last year that got all the way to the grand final. Did the grand final leave some scars? Some would say yes, but I don't think so. They still made the finals. dubious. I understand Curse fans, please. I understand. But this is just one team that can be very dangerous because there's no expectations on them. They're literally going down to the MCG with a free hit. They're going to have a red hot crack. And if Carleton takes them lightly, this could get out of hand for Carleton because this is also a team that I think Harry Mackay has screwed this team up. And I know this is weird to say, but they're not the fast flowing, great scoring team since Harry Mackay has come back. And this was a GWS team that was good, but Sydney has just beat this GWS team. So I mean, there's the logical decision. Is this a bad matchup? My X factor will be Nick Blakey because I think his run out of halfback could cause Carleton headaches because after with Harry Mackay being there, they don't have as many tackling pressure forwards. Their pressure's kind of deceased a little bit. And if he can run off back, he can pinpoint passes. Armadi's really good hands. Logan McDonald, Hayden McLean is really good. I think Hickey could shift forward a little bit. Isaac Heaney, Will Hayward, they've got a lot of really good marking forwards that if Blakey can get loose, can give that defense headaches all day because no matter who Wiedering takes, there's still going to be two talls potentially that are both pretty quick that can get loose. So I think the X factor could be Nick Blakey. On the opposite side, I think it's Sam Doherty. Can Doherty get loose? And does Sydney put a clamp on him and potentially put a Ryan Clark on him to try to take him out of the game? Force Sod to do most of the coming out of the back. And after a while, sometimes Sod decision making can go a little bit. So a couple of X factors would be who's running halfback can get loose.
Yeah. No, I think that's really spot on there. I was thinking about Sod as being my X factor for the Blues, but I'm gonna go with someone who might surprise you a little bit in Adam Chera.
Yep.
I think he's someone who, generally speaking, benefits from the extra attention that you give Patty Cripps and Sam Walsh. Of course, we know Walsh has been a little banged up this year and hasn't been at his best, but he and Cripps are going to get all the attention in the midfield. And I think having someone like Chera, who has been a really good addition for the Blues overall since coming over from Trios. So I think having someone like him who can thrive when opposition players might be tempted to tag Cripps, at the very least they're going to try to minimize Walsh's impact and just try to again, Sydney's been vulnerable in the clearances. What can Chera do to just feed Curnow, feed Jack Martin, feed Cottrell, some of those other forwards that don't get as much attention as Mackay or Curnow. I do think Mackay, that there's still questions in the same way that there's questions about Gawn and Grundy. How do they both fit into Melvin's plans? How does Carleton fit Mackay and Curnow into those plans? Speaking of which, I think another X factor, and this is more of an intangibles one, Ed Curnow. He's calling it a career. You wonder if the Blues are going to be extra motivated with Charlie getting the Coleman and Ed retiring. The Curnow brothers are definitely going to have some motivation. And I think the team in general is going to be motivated. Again, not much finals experience. John Longmire and his Swans, they have so much finals experience. So very much a weird dynamic in that Carleton's probably a slight favorite. They do have, it's a friendly game at the MCG. They are going to have a crowd. But, in terms of finals experience, complete opposite. So Carleton does have to be aware of that. I think the biggest test for Mike Voss as a coach is just, it's a cliche, but one game at a time, one goal at a time. We set a goal to make the 8, you made the 8. Now we set a goal to win a final, then you can start talking about the premiership window being completely open, finals being 100% in sight, because this is Carleton. To use the American football term, there have been more than a few false starts with Carleton. So I think Voss is trying to get them to think one step at a time. Feed Curnow, feed Cripps, feed your playmakers. And if they can win the midfield battle, start strong and really start blowing Sydney out clearance-wise, it could be a long day. But the Swans have experience and you can't beat experience. So this is going to be a fascinating match.
This is that I don't think there is not a bad matchup in these four. Like there is an intrigue to every single one. Let's jump to the one that I know you are going to be laser focused on, and that is St. Kilda GWS. So same thing. Questions that you're going into it, and who's the X factor that could change this game?
I think it's Tom Green. Again, Toby Green's
Mhm.
going to get all the attention, much like Cripps is going to get all the attention from Carlson. We've seen Toby Green almost single-handedly get the Giants over the line so many times, but you see all the other players who are really thriving in Kingsley's system, and you wonder, oh, who's next? Because again, you have Hogan step up and kick a huge back one. You might have Riccardi kick 4 or 5 the next. They're spreading the ball around, and as much credit as Toby Green gets, Tom Green and the other guys were feeding that forward line. We mentioned Canelio, 200 games. Really proud of him and how well he's done. He's been in phenomenal form all year. And of course, we know Cal Ward, Lockie Whitfield, some of those veteran players can do. But Tom Green, he's the youngster. What I love about him is that it's almost like there's no pressure at all. Like, I mean, if you think about it on paper, of course, we knew the Giants' expectations would be low. Everyone acknowledged I had them picked well on the ladder. Thought we would have a chance to upset some teams down the stretch once Kingsley's systems really take effect. Of course, we went on a tear, and I wasn't expecting that, nor was the rest of the time. So I think they match up well against St. Kilda, but Tom Green and what I was saying about him being so cool under pressure. Taranto and Hopper leave. He just absorbs so much more of the footing that those guys would have gotten. And he has so much chemistry with Kyle Ward, with Canelio, with Josh Kelly. So many of the regular gun midfielders that have been in Giants uniforms for years. But Tom Green is still only in his first few seasons, and he's showing everyone why he's a ball magnet. So I think if he can get 30, 35 touches at least, Giants are going to be in good shape.
Mm-hmm. My question for this will be whose game style is going to win out? Is the Orange Tsunami going to be able to overrun a St. Kilda team that, again, it's very structured, very sound? It's a Ross Lyon team, so they're going to know what they need to do. And then for me, the X factor, I think, is in the coach's box, and that's Ross Lyon. Does Ross Lyon find a way to strangle the midfield? Can he take Tom Green and Canelio's influence out of this game? Can he make it a dour kind of defensive type of game? Because I think that helps St. Kilda. If GWS can get the pace going a little bit more, I think that helps GWS. So this is going to be one of those. I think the X factor is the coach's box. I think it's can Ross or Ken Kingsley, which can make their style be the way this game is played. Because if it's up paced, I think GWS has got the firepower and the ability to score a little bit more consistently than the Saints do. But if the Saints can make it a dour, very much defensive type of game, then I think that kind of strangles GWS and what they kind of like to do with momentum and a lot of kind of the orange tsunami, as they say. If they can take that away, then St. Kilda's really in this. This is going to be a fascinating one. It really is a battle of fun styles that'll be very interesting. And the last but not least, I mean, how about this? The final game is up at the GABA between two absolutely cracking offensive teams with an absolutely star-studded midfield. So my question for this is can Brisbane handle the hype that is everybody's saying this is Brisbane's opportunity to get to a grand final? They're going to be at the GABA until the grand final. So the question is, will they break under the pressure, or can they make diamonds out of themselves and get themselves to a grand final for the first time in a long time? And my X factor will be Oscar McInerney. And the reason that I say this is because these are two teams with really good midfields. This is a Brisbane Lions team with a very good forward three with Charlie Cameron, with Danaher, and with Hipwood. This is a Port Adelaide team that has struggled a little bit when it comes to cohesion in the backline. If Oscar McInerney gets a weak matchup, not a Lysette, but one of their younger ruckmen, if he can give Brisbane the majority or at least a high number of clearances out of the center with Neil and Dunkley and McCluggage and their midfield, it's going to be a long day for Aliir, Tom Jonas, and that back line, because there's Reina, they have so many weapons to come at you. it'll be a long day for Port Adelaide if they can at least neutralize Oscar McInerney and make it very dour in the mid. Let Butters and Rosie get those scrappy balls underneath. It'll be fascinating to see how that goes. Could Boak and Wines really come in handy with their big bodies in this particular game, going up against a little bit of a quicker Neil? That way you could leave Rosie and Butters out on the wings to kind of use their speed. So this will be a fun one. I think the ruck comp, I think whoever wins the ruck hits to advantage, I think is going to be the team that wins this game, because both teams have electric offenses when they get going forward and defenses that can sometimes have some struggles. So this will be a fascinating one. I think this could be the score fest of the entire weekend. This could be one comes down to who has the ball last completely on that one.
Yeah.
So your question and your X factor for this one.
My question is, how do the Lions shut down Zach Butters? That's a huge question whenever you're facing Ford. Again, we talk about Wines, we talk about Rosie, Powell Pepper, so many, really sturdy, reliable players that you have on Ford's list. But they know Butters is a ball magnet. Brisbane, do you tag him? Do you not tag him? What's the best one-on-one matchup against Butters in the midfield? And I think so. That's I think the biggest question for Brisbane in terms of an X factor. I think just both teams have definitely had back on questions, and we've talked about that a little bit already. I think having someone like Connor McKenna, he's had a really solid season, kind of rebirthing his career at Brisbane. But that's a back line that's going to be under siege. You've got Caden Coleman, you've got a handful of guys back there. Harris Andrews, he's still one of the best fullbacks in the game. But Brisbane, we know they can sometimes give up points in chunks, and against a team like Port, that's really dangerous. So I think just playing 4 complete quarters of footy in a tough environment for Port, and also just for Brisbane. Again, they have occasionally drifted quarter to quarter. Sometimes they kick in accurately. I think they just need to make sure that they're not making silly mistakes and just being disciplined. Because home ground advantage is great, but if you're not disciplined, you're not going to win a final. So I think there's definitely it's definitely got the potential to be a score fest. I think you're spot on with that.
I that one's going to be fireworks, absolutely there. So all right, so I was fun preview. We'll revert back to round 24 really quickly. I'll do my team of the week. I will do an AA. I know there's some people that have asked me. They go, Coach, have you ever done it? I will do an All Australian. I will premiere that team for the preview of the grand final episode, which will be in a few weeks. So
Keep
we will not.
Toes,
we will.
So keep on your toes.
Oh, I know exactly. I always like saving it for just before the grand final, and I will warn everybody, there will not be a show. There will be a show next week reviewing these 4 games, and then there won't be a show until the grand final preview, because with only 2 games in the semifinals, I kind of like doing at least 4. That gives us plenty of games to talk about. So there will be a show next week. I already have that particular that particular co-host set up, so I'm all good there. So we will do round 24, the team of the week, really, really quickly. And then we'll do I will do an 8-team power rankings on how I see power rankings on the teams going into the finals. So really quickly, round 24, I know it's a little bit back. So, and the defense and the fullback roles, we have Essendon's Jaden Laverde. He at least played a decent game for Essendon, unfortunately. Hawthorn's James Sicily and Norse Aiden Core. You kick a goal from the defensive line, I got to give you a little bit of love. Halfback line sees the prototypical Tom Stewart from the Geelong Cats, Port Adelaide's Dan Houston, and GWS's Lockie Whitfield had an incredible game for the Giants there. On the wing seems Gold Coast Sam Flanders with a nice little addition, and Sydney's Errol Goulden, as you said, 42 touches and 2 goals, absolutely fantastic in the center.
Flanders is very underrated. I like him.
I loved his game in this one. He was fantastic. Even in a losing effort, he played really, really well. Yeah. In the center sees Andrew Brayshaw of the Fremantle Dockers, the Western Bulldogs, Adam Chalor, and GWS's Stephen Canelio. with the ruckman being Tim English of the Western Bulldogs, and the forward line, as you kind of mentioned him before, the fun, controversial Jack Ginnivan of the Collingwood Magpies. Adelaide Tex Walker, you kick 9 goals, you come close, I got to get you into the team. GWS's Toby Green, full forward sees Nick Larkey of the North Melbourne Roos, Melbourne's Bailey Fritsch, and West Coast Oscar Allen will round out the starters. On the bench. Defense sees Melbourne's Stephen May. Ruck sees Oscar McInerney of the Brisbane Lions. Adelaide's Jake Saligo in the midfield, and the Western Bulldogs Rory Lobb rounds out the final team of the week when it comes to rounds. Like I said, the AA will come very, very soon. A fun, little interesting group put together there. Your thoughts really quickly.
Yeah, that's a really solid list. I think Bailey Fritsch definitely, 5 goals. Tex had a great game, of course. Like you said, Canelio in the midfield, Golden, 42 touches. My goodness. And again, in a losing effort, that's got to be so deflating. I wish I could say I was good enough to get 40 plus touches in winning or losing effort. But no, yeah, definitely. And just Tim English, again, he's had a hell of a season for the doggies. Again,
he earned his All-Australian. It was very interesting because Rowan Marshall was coming like a freight train there in the last few rounds for sure. So
I've been very impressed with him. Yeah.
So
another veteran guy who just flies under the radar, and he's been very good for St. Kilda.
All righty. And last, we'll go to the power rankings. So this is with the What Have You Done For Me Lately power rankings of the top 8. So this is records winning. So here we go. Number 8, unfortunately, Sydney Swans. Unfortunately, they lose the last game of the season. Kind of always downs you. 7, St. Kilda. Number 6, Collingwood. They got the win over Essendon, but I downgrade that win a little bit because, Essendon absolutely did not show up. Number 5, the Carlton Blues. Again, yes, they lost, but they played really well. I think they were focused on finals and trying to get the Coleman medal to Charlie Curnow. So number 4, the GWS Giants, again playing really solid footy. The loss to Sydney really has been one of their few blemishes late in the year. Number 3, the Melbourne Demons. Number 2, the Port Adelaide Power, and number 1, the Brisbane Lions. Again, playing very good footy going forward. Again, this is not the way that the teams ended the season. This is just form and how they're playing going into the finals. That's why I said Collingwood, I think, is very, very vulnerable going into the finals. Let's do it, sir. I know over here, especially during March Madness, we have the bracket challenge. So I'm going to kind of have some fun. We're going to do a bracket. We're going to fill out who is going to be our premiers, but how we're going to do it is a little bit different. Let's fill out one side of the bracket, get one team into the preliminary final, and the team to flip to the other side preliminary final. So let's start off 1v4, Collingwood v Melbourne. You said your tip was Melbourne. Have you changed your mind, or is it still the D's?
I'm still tipping the D's, but by 1 goal, maybe even less. It's going to be really tight.
I'm going to tip the D's because there's rain, there's wind, and there's really cold weather, and defensive footy is going to win out in this one because of the weather conditions. The fly footy that I think a lot of people love may be tarnished a little bit with the weather conditions. It's a little bit like it was for their game earlier in the year, which the D's really did choke the life out of Collingwood as that game went on.
Was that Queen's birthday?
What was that? Yeah, the King's birthday now. Yeah, unfortunately, when the Queen passes now, it becomes the King's birthday. Unfortunately, so
that was the rainy season.
Right? It was a rainy, dour, cold evening that night, and the D's really, like I said, the D's just defensively were absolutely magnificent in that game. So I am with you. I got the D's in this one. I think this is a perfect setup. I think Dacos would be a handy addition in this one. Unfortunately, he's not going to be there, which I think hurts their kind of run out of their back half. And I think the D's pressure really has ramped up. McDonald coming in from Melksham, I think will even that out. I don't think they'll see a dip on that. I think the D's and Max Gawn, I think, has a heyday against Cameron and Cox. And I think it lets Oliver, Petrarca, Viney, Brayshaw have absolute field days. Unfortunately, I think DeGoey and the midfield of Collingwood may be tackling a lot more than disposing in this particular game. So I have the D's in this one. So the loser Collingwood will now play the winner of Carlton to be Sydney. I'm a diehard Sydney fan, but I scared to death that if this game becomes a contested center bounce footy type of game, Carlton really would go well. I know I put a lot of bluster in what I said earlier, and the X factor is, can Carlton survive the pressure? And Carlton wins this one, but I just think it's because of their game style really matches up well against Sydney's. But don't count Sydney. I'm not saying this is going to be a blowout. I think Sydney is in
Yeah.
this one. I think they have enough weapons, and Carlton sometimes can be sketchy going defensively. So Carlton cannot be wayward offensively. If they kick wayward and Sydney can find accuracy, this could be one of those where Carlton's kicking themselves because it's lack of goal kicking that could cost them. So tip Carlton, but I think Sydney is in this one. So now we'll go to this Collingwood, Carlton to get to the preliminary final. Who flips to the other side of the bracket?
Hmm. Okay, so my side, I'm tipping for Carlton Sydney. You're right. I do think it'll be close. I'm tipping Carlton by 16 points. Um, and yeah, I'm tipping Carlton by 16 points.
Okay. Carlton Collingwood. I sorry, I assumed they're on your side. My apologies.
Hey, sorry, can we hit pause for 1 second? I apologize.
All right, so let's go to it. Semifinal, Carlton v Collingwood. I do apologize a little bit for maybe jumping in there. I might be doing this again. We had to pause the recording just really quick there for a second. So Collingwood, Carlton, who flips to the other side in to go to the preliminary final?
I say Collingwood again. They've got more experience. I trust them in close games more so than I do the Blues. You're right to mention McRae's finals record, but he's still fairly young in his coaching career, so that can flip. We know that can happen. We've seen it before. So I think a lot is contingent on the midfield battle and on if whether Collingwood has enough consistent scoring threats. Again, the small forwards, Bobby Hill, Jamie Elliott, those guys are definitely worth watching, just as much as Cox, McStay, Myercheck, Johnson, maybe if he's available. The usual suspects down there. I like what I've seen from Johnson. Still a very raw player. There's still questions about whether or not he should maybe play rock part time, but as a center half forward type of project player, if he could have an amazing moment in a final, that would do a whole lot for his confidence and help just the Pies develop more targets up there, because there's always that question. Myercheck's a bit undersized. Of course, we know Cox can do great things, but he's still been a project player. So I think the more threats they have there, the better. And if Pendlebury can work his magic in the midfield and link up with the Dacosses and make things, of course, if Nick is healthy by then, they'll definitely be favored by a lot more, probably, in that hypothetical matchup with Carlton. But just in general, I trust the Pies.
I'm with you just because again, it's I think flyball again works well in this situation because I think again Carlton's kind of a little bit of a one trick pony with their winning of clearance out of the center. Unfortunately, if they get hemmed in or get taken away from that, then sometimes they kind of go a little loopy. I will go Collingwood in this one, but I hate saying it. I'm not sure if you're aware of this. Ash Johnson has broken his forearm, so I do believe he may be out. I'm not sure if he'll get back in time unless they get to the grand final, and I think even that would be pushing it a little bit. So, and Nick Dacos, I think the semifinal he would be okay. But I think if you're Collingwood, you probably would prefer to get to the prelims, so then you can give Nick just one more week of rest. But I think if they are in the semi, I think he plays. So I think he's already been confirmed he will not play against the D's, which I think is smart by Collingwood. There's no reason to risk him in a game where you're still guaranteed a game the next week, no matter what, worst case scenario. So
I do think, you're right. No sense in risking it unnecessarily. I know he got Pies fans excited because I think he was running and training ahead of schedule.
in a straight line though, there was no movements, and with something like that, I think jumping at shadows a little bit again. Collingwood fans again.
Exactly.
I'm not trying to discourage you at all here, but I think this is one of those that this got poured on cold water really quickly. So, and I appreciate that they're looking after the player, because sometimes you have to look after the player over themselves a little bit. So let's jump to the other side of the bracket. So we have Melbourne and Collingwood moving on to the prelims on opposite sides. So now let's see it. Elimination game, St. Kilda, GWS. Is your GWS heart gonna make you tip, or are you gonna go with St. Kilda?
I do think the Giants can get it done against St. Kilda. Again, playing at the MCG is always a gamble. But then again, St. Kilda, they, usually play more of their games at Marvel anyway. And, so I don't know if that's as much of an advantage for them as it is for, say,
Mm-hmm.
Tigers or the D's or the Blues. But either way, the Saints have shown vulnerability. Like Max King, we still don't know if he's your go-to reliable forward in a final. Again, he's shown plenty of potential, but sometimes he'll kick 0 goals 3. You never know. I like what I've seen from Jack Sinclair, Jack Steele. Mitch Owens has been a real revelation for the Saints. I think they play a really good brand of footy, but against the Orange Tsunami, I think they might have some trouble. I don't tip GWS by much, but I do think they could win that final ahead of schedule in year one under Kingsley. And wouldn't that be something?
I'm fully with you. I think that the dour defensive style might punish a little bit. I think GWS is on a hot streak. I think they come in a lot more confident.
Yeah.
St. Kilda, there's question marks. I think this is a free hit for GWS because nobody was expecting him to be there. If I'm Kingsley, I let him know. I said that no matter you win, lose, or draw, it doesn't really matter. You still did more than most people think. So I think they come out. I think they come out like gangbusters, and I worry that St. Kilda won't be ready for it. So I'm with you. I'm going to tip the Giants in this one. So let's see.
I do think you mentioned yeah, sorry to interrupt. You mentioned the weather. If I honestly, apart from the huge comeback win in Ballarat, it's really cold and windy. I don't think the Giants are really good in adverse weather. Recent, rainy, windy, blustery winter weather in Melbourne. So I'm not, if it is if it is a rainy day at the MCG, I don't like the Giants' chances as much. But again, in terms of that rugged defensive footy, Ross Lyon is going to try to play to their strengths in that regard for the Saints. So it could be a different game if the weather is a factor, but in general, I still like the Giants.
I don't think either team actually benefits from that because I think the Saints are used to playing under the roof at Marvel. So I think they're used to playing a little more dry weather footy. They don't get a lot of games at the MCG. So honestly, I think it's a neutral. I don't think it. I think the game will be more about like I think in some situations with the kamikaze style or the orange tsunami that they could almost go Richmond, which might actually benefit them a little bit when it comes to the wet weather footy. We'll have to see. So
yeah, well, Kingsley has that background,
Yeah, exactly. I thought it was funny that Hopper and Taranto go to Richmond, Kingsley goes to GWS, and the coach one is the one that ends up being more successful in the first year. So I thought that was kind of funny. So let's jump up to the Gala. Brisbane v Port Adelaide, as we said. I think this is going to be a goal fest. I think Brisbane just has a few too many weapons. I think even if Scooter Lysette plays, I think Oscar McInerney really lets Brisbane get going. I think Brisbane win this one, but this is an absolute cracking final game of the finals. I have Brisbane and I have Port Adelaide moving to play GWS in that semifinal.
Yeah, no, I would tip the same. Yeah, like again, the GABA advantage is well documented. Brisbane, again, they need to kick after. Like, I think that needs to be talked about just as much as their record at MPG. Like this year, I'm pretty sure they were overall better on accuracy. But again, the last few matches, Danaher had an absolute laugher that went off the post. You probably saw it from literally the top of the goal square. That one definitely made all the blooper reels. But yeah, just in general, the Lions just sometimes just can't pick straight. And I think even when they're at home, even when they have the crowd on their side, in terms of, they know Port's going to come. They know Port is an attacking team that, that they're going to fight you till the final siren and then. So I think Brisbane's going to win narrowly in that semifinal with Port and GWS. As much of a Giants fan as I am, I don't see them winning that one at all. I think Port would win pretty big. And by pretty big, I mean probably like 4 goals. The Giants, I definitely think in that, again, a hypothetical matchup, Giants would be a matchup problem, but Port would just probably run away with it in the third or fourth. So
Adelaide Oval. They've played well at the Adelaide. They've played well. They've played
yeah,
well on the road. So I
we
don't
played
think it's
well
gonna
everywhere. We played 9 different venues and won at
exactly.
9 different venues.
I was just about to go there and you
Right,
beat me to it. So it
road
shows you
warriors.
how in sync we are when it comes to our thought process on that. I think that semifinal game would be absolute cracker because I think GWS will again go in knowing it's a free hit. They're not going to be expected. Everybody's going to tip Port Adelaide in that game. Honestly, I'm one of those where I want to know, do they get Scooter back? Do they get that Ruckman back? Because against Kieran Briggs, I think it's another one where they're going to need it because when you have Tom Green, you have Canelio, you have Kelly in the midfield, that's going to neutralize a little bit of Rosie and Butters things because that's a big bodied midfield that can maybe body the little smaller, quick Butters and Rosie. So
Possibly.
I think Port win, but that one comes down to the fourth quarter. I think it's close
Well,
because I think GWS's
you.
style would fit in that particular atmosphere. I'd be interested who Alir takes in that situation. Would he take Riccardi? Would he take Hogan?
Probably Hogan.
And then who would get the green matchup? Because I think that would be, could you see a Willem Drew maybe sit back and kind of take him, considering normally he's the mid tagger? Would they shift him back to kind of take Toby out? Because if you can take Toby out, you can kind of suck the life a little bit out of GWS, which I think Port may do. I think Port wins it, but I don't think it's four. I think it's 2 goals or less. I think GWS is playing good enough footy, and Port is just not 100% there that I think GWS is in it. I think Port wins it, but I think they would win it on like a Dan Houston late goal or a Rosie or a Butters bit of magic late in the game to maybe make it like an 8 or 9 point win. So
Well, I
I think
think
Port win it, but it's close.
I think you touched on something that I think is just important in most Port related discussions in terms of, you mentioned Lysette. He's the guy who's, he's been around a while, doesn't get a lot of love, or not enough love for a guy who won a flag with West Coast and then moved up, right? But no, yeah, his health is he's been banged up most of the year. His health is really important because they're thin and rough. And I don't think Port. I mean, like in the past, you could probably see like teams like Geelong, of course, that they've almost been given a pass in terms of like their ruck, their ruck work. Reece Stanley doesn't exactly like World on Fire, but Dangerfield and Guthrie and all their other midfielders that the Cats have, they can still thrive regardless of winning every tackle. They're just that good. I don't think Port is there. I think they still need to have that ruckman who can win the taps. And again, especially against a big guy like Briggs, who's just broken out, come out of nowhere, and really become a mainstay for the Giants, where they needed someone to put his hand up and be that number one ruck. And of course, Mummy still being the ruck coach. I think that Briggs has taken a few pages from Mummy's play. So, but yeah, you're right. In terms of Port possibly being deficient in the ruck with Biden at 100% and not a clear depth picture behind him, I think that could possibly come back to bite them down the stretch. But I still like them in the head with GWS. So.
I like them, but I think that even that brings GWS into the game a little bit more with the Greens and the Canelios, who are contested beasts. And if Briggs is giving them that's going to give him a good launching pad. So let's jump to it. First prelim, she's Port Adelaide, Melbourne for both of us. And I think we both have the same final four: Port Adelaide versus Melbourne and Collingwood v Brisbane. So it'd be Port Adelaide at the MCG versus Melbourne. Who gets the first ticket into the grand final?
Port Adelaide, Melbourne at the MCG. That's tough.
I don't think it's much of a choice. I think it's D's because I think Mac's gone. No matter if they've got Scooter Lysette or not, I think the D's have that advantage. I think again the big body midfielders, especially if they pay GBWS and get a little bit beat up a little bit, I think that then sets up Melbourne to be really good. I think Melbourne win it. I don't think it's a runaway, but I think Melbourne could get away if Port can't get themselves going because of Max gone, being able to dominate a ruck contest if it is not a decent ruck like Scott Lysette.
Well, I expect, regardless of the ruck matchup, I expect Port to run their guts out. I
Oh
think
yeah.
they're really good at doing that. They're one of the fittest sides in the competition. I definitely think they'll get some bang for their buck in terms of pace and fitness and matching the D's at that level. I think the X factor is, again, how healthy is Port? How many forward options do they have? And normally with the game plan against Melbourne, of course, how do you shut down Weaver and May? How do you limit? We've seen a bunch of teams kind of eliminate one, but it's been rare when both of them can be limited simultaneously. I don't know if Port has the horses able to do that. I think I think they play a spirited game. They play their hearts out every time they're on the MCG because they're not on there that much. But you're right. I do think the D's come away with a narrow victory against the Power at the MCG.
The only way the Port win this game is if Pal Pepper can take away Lever and Chaz Dixon can at least neutralize May. At least I think is the only way that happens. And if Dixon is not healthy, Marshall is not big enough to be able to keep May out of the contest. And I think Pal Pepper can play enough of a defensive role. He can keep Lever quiet. But if May can't be shut down, then you're going to have a heck of a time trying to beat Melbourne in that one. But I still think Port's in it. I just think it could get away from them if the D's get dominant out of the mids with Oliver and Petrarca going bonkers going forward. So both of us, I believe, that have the D's in the grand final. Who's going to be their opponent? This is interesting. Collingwood, because they came from the elimination, will have to go to the GABA to play the Lions. And I think Collingwood step back when they leave the confines of the MCG. I like Brisbane in this one. I think Oscar McInerney and that midfield, they've already been able to defeat Collingwood at the GABA once. I don't think Collingwood has really changed that much from it. In fact, I think they've actually gotten a little weaker, even with the Dacos addition. I think Brisbane beat them, and I think we have a Melbourne-Brisbane grand final to end the season.
Yeah, I feel pretty similar. But I don't think it's necessarily Hollywood on the road. I think it's just their form as of late. Again, they just have not the minor premiership. Again, that's like a participation trophy for minor premiers, but it almost felt like, oh yeah, Hollywood. Like it seems so anticlimactic just because, like, again, no one gets cigars for beating an Essendon team that barely even wants to be there. So I think they do still have a lot more questions and they want to commit, again, irrespective of what's happening with Nick Daicos. I do tip Brisbane here. I think the X factor, and this is a guy who frequently shines on the big stage. He hasn't, kicked a bag 5 or 6 in a few months, but Charlie Cameron. Charlie Cameron gets the fans on their feet again. And I think someone like him, it's almost like, again, he could bring the excitement that a small forward like Bobby Hill or Jamie Elliott could do for the Pops, or they would if Jamie Elliott could ever finally stay healthy for a full season. He is so dynamic when he's healthy. He's healthy and 100%, so rare that it's with him, it's just always almost unfulfilled, as good as he is. But I think Charlie Cameron, he is someone, even when Danaher is not kicking accurately, or even if Hipwood, it may not be his night, having guys like Charlie Cameron, to a lesser extent, Lincoln McCarthy, Zach Bailey, there's some really versatile weapons. And, Rayner, of course, he can still, I know they want to play him a little bit more in the midfield, but he can move forward and kick from 50 if he wants. So I think Brisbane has a lot of weapons. Again, if they're kicking accurately and they're firing on all cylinders, they're tough to beat. And with Charlie Cameron, if he can just crumb at Danaher's feet and do his thing, because, in terms of just like being able to break a defender's ankle or just pick a snap off with 1 foot from a crazy angle, Charlie Cameron's your guy. And having him is just kind of a spark plug for that offense for when things might be the third quarter, players might be a little gassed. We know it can get humid up in Brisbane. I think having someone like that who just get the fans on their feet and put the foot down on the accelerator when it's that third quarter, and you need just a few extra goals to pad that lead and get through to a big win. So someone like him is huge.
It'll be interesting because I would think I think Isaac Quaynor would get that matchup, and I think in the first matchup, Quaynor kind of kept him a little bit quiet. I would almost go Bailey and Reina would be my X factors because I don't think Collingwood has a fifth and sixth defender or fourth and fifth defenders that can actually keep them quiet. I think you would see the more Danaher matchup. You'd probably see Hipwood with oh
Maynard,
shoot,
maybe.
Murphy would be.
Murphy? Okay. Yeah.
Bruzzy Maynard would be the fun one because who would he take? Who would he take? Would he take Bailey or
Ooh,
Reina, depending on who would be there? Even still, Oleg Markov would not be able to handle either Bailey or Reina. I think that would be a bad matchup there. So I would almost say one of those two. Whoever would get the Oleg Markov matchup would probably be the one. Even because if they put Dacos back there, Dacos is going to have to defend, and I love
right.
Dacos is an incredible player, but defensively, I think sometimes he can be a little bit. He can be a little bit
For Nick.
wanting to get on the offensive side of the play, and sometimes gets out of position defensively. So that
Yeah.
I it'll be fascinating. That'll be a fun one. But I
Yeah.
agree,
I
Brisbane
think
v Melbourne grand final. So go ahead.
no, I was gonna say, yeah, I'm glad you're showing Quaynor some love because I think he's another guy who is an underrated part. You know, he's a key cog in what the Pockets do defensively. You know, he's not flashy, he's not sexy, he doesn't, add the stats, but he does his job well. And I
Mhm.
think in that matchup with Cameron, I think it would be really interesting. I have a feeling, you're right. Quaynor could definitely he has the athleticism to really hang with someone like Cameron, who's notoriously slippery up there.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So let's get to it. We both got it. Melbourne, Brisbane grand final. Do you want to go first? Do you want me on who I got on the tips on this one?
Well, I'm going against my judgment from the start of the season. I did tip the D's, but I to win the flag. But I do think there's something about Brisbane this year that just feels different. I know they've been
Mhm.
made the last few years. We know their MCG record isn't good, but at some point, I mean, they did win, I think, one or two last year there that snapped the skid. But at some point, your luck has to turn, right?
Mhm.
We know that footy's game stats and analytics, but even if you look at the analytics, in the close games, you have to be on the right side of them. At some point, it's just the law of averages. But I do like Brisbane's chances here. I just think, again, if they're healthy and they're kicking accurately, they are really hard to stop. I still have a few questions about the back line. I mentioned McKenna as a key player. Caden Coleman's looked pretty good, but he's another guy who he's a little on the small side. I'm not sure how well he would match up against some bigger, more damaging half forward types for Melbourne or Collingwood. But Brisbane still has Harris Andrews. Again, he hasn't been rock solid as he's been in previous years, but he's still a great fullback. He definitely helped set the tone down there. And I think just again, we spoke about our midfield. Lockie Neal needs no introduction. Hugh McCluggage does great work for Big O. Of course, you mentioned him as well, and Zorko. Zorko, he can sometimes be too physical or draw some unneeded umpire scrutiny. But again, he's another guy who it's hard to imagine Brisbane without Zorko. Again, he helps set the tone in that midfield. He's the one
Mhm.
who's trying to direct traffic there alongside me. So those guys are really hard to stop. And like I obviously Melbourne, their big three, Oliver, Trock, gone. Those guys are phenomenal for a reason. But in general, I trust Brisbane's forwards more, and I think, again, I trust them against Lever and Met. I can't say that about everyone.
All great points. I like that you taking the jump because I think a lot of people go, well, they've only won one game at the MCG,
Yeah,
but it was against Melbourne last year in that
true.
preliminary final in that qualifying final. So in that semifinal. So I'm
Sure.
gonna go D's just because I think they play the MCG really well. Again, I don't know. I just feel like Brisbane is built so much better for the GABA than they are the MCG. It'll be fascinating to see how it goes. I think the D's faithful will pack out the MCG if they get to the grand final because the last one was out west and none of them can get over from Melbourne. So I think
Right.
that will really help. How will Brisbane travel if they get to the grand final? Be fascinating there. I like the D's mojo a little bit more. I think the Lions are going to get a little bit of and I know it's weird saying, I think they're going to get a little bit of the easier side of the draw when it comes to it. Just be kind of just out of the simple fact, which is really funny because they would both, by the way, would both play Port Adelaide. But I just think Melbourne, they fit the styles that the teams that they're going to play better than the Lions do a little bit. I like the matchups. I don't think they have that defensive stopper to take out Lever, which would then leave May to kind of have his body contact the heck out of Danaher, which I think sometimes can throw Danaher off a little bit. You do have those dangerous the Reynas, the Camerons, but I just, there's something about this D's team that I like to where it's like, I don't think they're that worried about it. So I'm going to tip the D's in this one, but the Lions definitely, they have the offensive firepower. If they can get it forward, they can cause headaches to any team in the competition. I think if that's the grand final, it is going to be a magnificent grand final. I hate to do this, Rick, but I have some things that I got to get done. So I am going to shut this episode down. This has been a fantastic chat. I know it's a little bit later than this has been so much fun. Keep an eye out, ladies and gentlemen. AFLW, my round 1 review is coming very, very soon. I have 2 fantastic female co-hosts to join me that I cannot wait to share and have a fun chat about a scintillating round 1. That is going to do it for my episode today. Again, we will be back again next week to cover all of these 4 games and how they pan out, who's moving on, who's going home, and get ready for more fantastic finals footy. That is going to do it for Donnie's Disposals. Rick, thank you again so much for hopping on, sir.
Thank you, Donnie. Always a pleasure.
Truly appreciate it. And that's going to do it. And we will see you again very, very soon.
Here's the song.